All right, I'd like to welcome you all and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Annalisa Davis. I'm the mother of a 4-year-old, the wife of an Army veteran, the daughter of a hunting family, and a volunteer with the Oregon chapter of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. I am here today along with about 100 of my fellow moms and dads from around the state who want to see Senate Bill 941 pass this year. It is time to close the background check loophole in Oregon. I'd like to start us off by introducing two of the bill's chief co-sponsors, Representative Jennifer Williamson and Senator Floyd Przansky. And ask y'all to come up.
Senator isn't here yet, so you could go to your next person and we can come in. That works.
All right. I am my next person. So that makes it easy. I am absolutely thrilled to be here in the Capitol today. Earlier this morning, we heard some great testimony from a wide range of Oregonians in support of this bill. We heard from law enforcement, we heard from survivors, we heard from the faith community. Overall, 81% of Oregonians support closing the background check loophole. I am one of those people, and so are all of the moms who are here with me today. Today's hearing was the first step toward keeping our kids, families, and communities safer. In states that have closed the background check loophole, 46% fewer women are killed by their abusers. 48% fewer law enforcement are killed with handguns, and 48% fewer people kill themselves with guns. That is the Oregon that I want to live in. That is where I want to raise my daughter. So I urge the committee to pass this bill to the Senate floor as quickly as possible. And now we will back up and introduce two of our bill's chief co-sponsors, Senator Floyd Przansky and Representative Jennifer Williamson. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, everyone. My name is Jennifer Williamson. I represent House District 36, which is Northwest, Southwest, and downtown Portland. I am so proud to be a chief co-sponsor of this bill with Senator Przansky, Senator Burdick, and Representative Hoyle. It shows a diversity, I think, in both regions and in political spectrum around who wants to keep our community safer and how we do it. So you heard earlier that 46% fewer deaths by abusers in states that have closed this loophole. When we have percentages and numbers like that, it is absolutely imperative that we close this loophole for the safety of our communities. I think it's common sense, and as I heard earlier, 81% of Oregonians support it. With that kind of mandate, I don't see how we could do anything else but pass this bill.
So thank y'all very much. Floyd Przansky, State Senator from District 4, which includes parts of Lane and Douglas counties. We've just had our public hearing on Senate Bill 941. I'm a supporter, chief sponsor of the bill for multiple reasons. I do believe this is the correct step to close the background loophole that we currently have. As many of you know, we've had a background check law in this state since 1989. In 2000, through a citizen initiative, it was broadened to include gun shows. Remember, at gun shows, there are not only just licensed dealers that are selling weapons, but also individuals. So since 2001, we have had private transactions under the background check that occur at gun shows, but they do not occur outside of the gun show. So basically, you can walk outside of the door of a event center, and you can actually have that same transaction that would require a background check inside the gun show, not require that. And we also know, because of the changes in our electronics, that we now have the ability and capacity of having guns being sold and through the internet, and there's no requirement for a background check. What we do know is that it does, in fact, is a safe and a means way and a lawful way to actually have a reasonable means of maintaining the best control that we can have in people who are ineligible from getting guns. Realize that I, as a gun owner for 45 years, believe this is a reasonable step. We know from the data that's come from the state police that approximately 19,000 plus lawful transactions take place per month in the state of Oregon. I'll say that again. Over 19,000 lawful transactions and transfers of guns occur per month in this state. At the same time, approximately 190 are denied. So about 1% of the individuals who are attempting to buy guns through a licensed dealer or at a gun show are denied. This tells me that we're actually keeping individuals that should not have and have been prohibited by law from having guns, having easy access to those weapons. Many of you know that my sister was murdered when I was in high school. I believe that it's very important from my perspective, not only as a legislator, as a prosecutor, but also as a family member, that we need to take reasonable steps to maintain the continuity and the law-abiding citizens having access to guns. And this is a means that we can actually limit easy access to guns to felons and individuals with mental health disorders. I will bring up one other part of the bill that I think is worth going over because there was statements that were made during the testimony today. Individuals that are now going before a court to be determined whether or not they should be placed into the state hospital, we have what's known as outpatient mental health treatment. Under those proposals, under the proposal in the bill, what will happen as the due process occurs in those proceedings, the judge will be making determination whether that individual, while they're in a mental health crisis, the ones that we know have caused most of the horrific damage and injuries and deaths to individuals who have had mental episodes that when they're acting out can in fact be prohibited from having easy access to guns by requiring them to be denied that right while they're in a mental health crisis. I believe, again, this is a reasonable step for us to have. Thank you very much. So, did y'all want to go through how we're going to do this? Because
I think I go back up. We've got several other speakers, and then thank you so much, Senator Przanski and Representative Williamson, for your leadership on this issue. As we heard earlier, 48% fewer law enforcement are killed with handguns in states that have closed the background check loophole. I'd like to introduce two of the many law enforcement officers across the state who are strong backers of this bill: retired Portland Chief Mike Reese and Lake Oswego Chief Don Johnson.
Don's better looking. As the former chief of the Portland Police Bureau, I was responsible for the safety of the people in the city of Portland, as well as the police officers that worked for the Portland Police Bureau. Like other major city police chiefs across the country, violent crime tied to gun violence is one of our biggest worries. We're not unique. Major cities across the United States face an escalation in gun violence. And keeping our community safe from gun violence was one of our top priorities in the city of Portland. I believe that one of the best ways to make sure that a person buying a gun has a legal right to own a gun is with a simple, straightforward background check. Current law rightfully prohibits certain dangerous people from having guns, such as felons, domestic abusers, and people with severe mental illness. I own firearms. And if I were to sell one of my guns, I would want to know that the buyer wasn't a criminal. Senate Bill 941 creates an easy way for responsible gun owners to make sure that their firearm doesn't end up in the hands of a criminal used to commit a violent crime. Now, I wanted to just share a story that I did in testimony earlier. I coach youth basketball at Wilson High School, and last year I helped coach our women's team. And as I was coaching a game, one of my officers was shot a block away from Wilson High School. The person who shot my officer was a convicted felon with a warrant out for his arrest and was wanted in the kidnapping of a woman. We know from our investigation that this man was stalking young women at nearby schools. I'm thankful that the officer survived and was able to protect himself and our community from an incredibly dangerous criminal armed with a gun. Those stories are not unique. Police officers too often in Portland face people armed with guns that shouldn't have them. Thank you very much. Chief Johnson.
I'm Don Johnson, and I'm proud to stand here and support a Senate Bill 941. I'm from the city of Lake Oswego. I've been the police chief there for the last 4 years. Prior to coming to Lake Oswego, I was in the state of California as a chief in two technology cities, Los Altos, California, and Sunnyvale, right in the middle of Silicon Valley. Population in that county is about $1.8 million, or 1.8 million people. And what I can tell you is California was a recipient of those statistics that you heard earlier, the lower incidence of domestic violence gun deaths, of 46% for law enforcement. That's what happens when you have strong gun laws. California had those strong gun laws. As I heard the testimony today, both sides of the testimony, but some things kept ringing true, and that's the reasonable, that's the responsible, that's the sensible nature of 941. It just makes sense to focus down on that 1%. If we can prevent 1% more of the gun deaths as a result of the enactment of this legislation, we're well ahead. So with that, I'm grateful for the bill sponsors to bring it forward, and I'm proud to stand here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Johnson and Chief Reese. Next, it's my honor to introduce two men that I have had the honor of working with through MOMS over the last year or so, and I've come to know both them and through them their loved ones, Cindy Ewell and Steve Forsyth, who were killed at the Clackamas Town Center shooting. So I'd like to invite Paul Kemp and Robert Ewell up.
Good afternoon. I'm Robert Ewell. My wife Cindy Ewell was murdered at Clackamas Town Center December 11th, 2012. She was Christmas shopping, just like so many other individuals were Christmas shopping that way. She was shot in the back with an automatic rifle. The bullet went through her lung and pierced her heart. I always refer to it, she died in a heartbeat. I just want to address the comments that were made today by the opposition to this bill. They were saying it was too inconvenient to have to go through a background check before you buy a firearm. I'd like to ask them, how inconvenient is it to have your wife taken from you in a heartbeat? To be thrown into single parenthood in a heartbeat? To become a single income earner in a heartbeat? Many people out there are not as fortunate as I am. I had support from the community. I was able to save my home. Not everybody can. This gun violence affects people in so many ways. It just goes beyond what anybody can imagine unless you actually experience it. So I'm hoping that through these testimonies and stuff, people will realize how gun violence affects everybody. Chief Hales referred this morning to the incident on 102nd Avenue in Stark, where the individual, I should say, pulled a gun out and sprayed kids in front of the recreation center on 106th and Stark. I live just a few blocks from there. Gun violence goes on all around us. We could have been walking down that street. Your kids could have been walking down that street. There are too many guns on the streets. This bill will not take all the guns off the streets. It will not remove all the guns from the illegal buyers. It will take some off. Hopefully, it will take the one off that would have killed your wife or your daughter. Thanks a lot for having me here. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Paul Kemp. My brother was killed at the Clackamas Town Center Mall. I was involved in the shooting almost from the get-go because my sister was at the mall, had just left her husband's side when he was shot. And she called me, and I went to the mall and have been involved in this issue since then. I'd also like to say I've been a gun owner for decades, a hunter. My son hunts, and I've also gone through several background checks in recent gun purchases here in Oregon. It is not a burden. It's very simple. It took me longer to fill out the paperwork than it actually takes to run the background check. I'd also, the other aspect of it, which is becoming more apparent, my son's high school just went through a lockdown drill. My daughter is going to be a teacher in the state of Oregon. They just recently, at an in-service day, had to go through active shooter training. I just refuse to believe that this is the new normal for our kids. I'd like to ask how many legislators in Oregon had to go through lockdown drills and training when they were in school, either elementary, middle, high school, or possibly college. This is absurd. And I guess one of my last comments would be, we have laws against murder, rape, robbery. They don't stop all of those from occurring. But hopefully, people that get charged with those crimes, they get convicted, they get taken off the streets, and it does prevent some of it. We have safety belts in cars, airbags. They don't prevent all traffic deaths, but they really reduce the injuries. I think because they don't prevent all injuries and deaths does not mean we should take them out of cars. And I guess the last thing is, I don't know anybody who's died from doing a background check. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul and Robert. I know you share these incredibly personal and painful stories over and over again, and I know that it never gets any easier for you all to relive those moments in that day. And that is really why we're here today. That's what Senate Bill 941 would do, is prevent more people from suffering the way Paul's family and Robert's family have. Now I'd like to introduce retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Julem with Veterans for Responsible Solutions.
Thank you. My name's Jeff Julem, retired Lieutenant Colonel from the U.S. Army. I served 29 years as an intelligence officer. My job was to analyze threats for the Army for any unit I worked with. The last 10 years I specialized mostly in terrorism. As I mentioned in testimony earlier, that got a little too emotional for me, I'm sorry. It's kind of personal for me. I was stationed at Fort Bragg in my last assignment to the 82nd Airborne's at. And another lieutenant colonel in intelligence, Roy Tisdale, had come back from deployment with his unit, and a specialist shot and killed him. And the great irony is, if you've ever been in the military, we go to great pains to be safe with our weapons. All our training is based upon safety. Everything we do is safety. And it wasn't the Army system that broke down. It was that he went off post. I think he had PTSD. He was under criminal charges, bought a weapon off post with no background check whatsoever, came back and shot that officer. Tremendous loss for our country. An American hero gunned down needlessly. I think a background check would have helped him in that point. In the military, we're all required to have a background check. Why? Because we want to make sure that the person's fit for service, not a criminal. But the second reason is, whether you're playing with bombs for an F-16 or machine guns, we want to make sure that you're safe to handle that weapon, and you're not going to turn it on your fellow service members. And so for me, a background check just makes sense. It's not an imposition of freedom. It's what you accept to protect people. It was mentioned earlier that people didn't go overseas to see rights eroded. I don't see it that way at all. I served 30 years. I don't mind giving up a little, quote-unquote, freedom if it protects my fellow citizens, because that's what my career was about, protecting this country. And I see this bill in the light of protecting fellow Oregonians. And that's why I support this Senate bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Colonel Julem, for speaking today and for your service. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Brennan Lewis, who's a pediatrician and a board member with Ceasefire Oregon.
Hi, my name is Brennan Lewis. I'm a pediatrician here in Oregon. I'm a board member of Ceasefire, as she mentioned. And I studied really hard in medical school for a really long time to learn about lots of different diseases, cancer, anaphylaxis, asthma, and they're all things that can kill kids, but they're far less likely to kill children than accidents, suicide, and homicide. And so that's what brings me here today, and that's why I support this bill. It's really focused on making sure that we keep the kids in Oregon safe. I understand that there's lots of different things we need to do, but this is keeping felons, domestic abusers, and those suffering from critical mental illness from being able to purchase guns, and I think that's a step in the right direction. I think any step that we can take to help support the children in Oregon and keep them safe is a step that is worth taking. Thank you.
All right, I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. Dan, are you closing us out, or are we moving? Okay. Our speakers are all available individually for questions. Thank you so much. Oh, and Dan.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Dan's going to close us out.
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity. And Senator Przansky and Representative Williamson, thank you for your tremendously inspiring leadership. And it really is inspiring to see the extent to which you're going to really have the back of the citizens of this state, which is what you do with this legislation. And it's an honor to be here alongside all of these advocates who have been working so hard on this and other issues to make Oregon and our nation safer, and especially Moms Demand Action, who I know are the organizers of this press conference and have a lobbying day here. It's an honor to be by your side. fighting the good fight as we are here. I'm Dan Gross. I'm president of the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence. I also come to this issue through personal experience. My younger brother, Matt Gross, was shot in a shooting that happened on the observation deck of the Empire State Building in 1997 by a man who was able to purchase a gun far too easily, actually in the state of Florida that he brought up to New York. And I also stand here as the proud father of a 13-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son. And all of those interests converge to result in my passionate support for this bill. One of the most powerful things I heard in the testimony today was one of the most simple, which is this is a no-brainer. It's kind of no-brainer. It'll save lives. Was it 87% of the citizens of Oregon support it? Who could possibly, strongly advocate against this? Yet people manage to, and I've been asked to kind of extemporaneously here in closing address some of the questions that we heard from those that do manage to work up opposition to something that would be this effective in enhancing public safety and is this overwhelmingly supported. So that's what I'll do. The first kind of theme was around the notion of convenience, saying it's an inconvenience to go through this measure to take a background check. I actually think it was summed up without statistics most compellingly a moment ago when somebody just said nobody's ever died from a background check. But let's talk numbers here in terms of convenience. A report from Everytown showed that 95% of Oregonians live within 10 miles of licensed dealers. 99% live within 25 miles. This is where you would need to meet to have a background check to make sure that the person buying the gun isn't a convicted felon or a domestic abuser or a rapist or somebody else who, we all agree shouldn't have a gun. And let's keep in mind here that we're talking, because it's internet sales, we're talking about arranged sales anyway. And so the chances are that the person who's trying to buy a gun and sell a gun is going to have to go much further than they are to just meet at a licensed dealer. So the lack of inconvenience is striking, I guess, to put it as a negative. There is no substantial inconvenience proposed by this, especially when it's weighed against the public benefit that it has the opportunity to create. The second was a theme you heard in a few questions, including from one of the senators, which is this idea of enforceability. Just like any other illicit activity, enforceability, a big part of the enforceability comes from the specter of being caught. And law enforcement knows how to create the specter of being caught. Take, for example, a scenario where you have a law enforcement officer posing as a buyer and they go online on a website where people clearly know they're breaking the law if they're selling guns without a background check. And you say, you arrange a sale and you have 10 handguns. The person, might at least very well suspect that they're doing it for, some sort of illicit cause. And you arrest that person for breaking the law. And then the press picks up on it and word gets out, just like with any other, whether it's child porn on the internet or any other activity. It's the specter of getting caught. Prostitution, it's the specter of getting caught that makes all of these laws utterly enforceable at the end of the day. And the last one, and it's the one you hear every time, and it's I called it today in my testimony utter hogwash, is this notion that if you pass a law like this, only criminals will be able to get guns, that this is only going to make it harder for law-abiding citizens. The reason I use the term like utter hogwash, because It's beyond that. It's exactly the opposite. All this law is going to do is prevent people who are already prohibited from owning guns from buying them, and does nothing to not only inconvenience but prevent a law-abiding citizen who is legally entitled to own a gun from buying that gun. So it's telling. That last one is the most telling of what the real agenda is here of the corporate gun lobby. Which is not to protect the best interests and the safety of the citizens of this state. It's to either defend a radical agenda. You heard words like treasonous and things like that coming from the other side today, or to protect the profits of the gun industry. It's the old story: follow the money. And when you see things that are this utterly untrue, that's the biggest red flag that you could ever have, that there's something else that's going on here. So I guess I would just close again by saying it's an honor to be here. The eyes of the nation are on Oregon with this bill. With its passage, Oregon will become the 6th state since Sandy Hook to pass background checks on all gun sales. There is a wave of momentum sweeping across the country. That's why I'm here, because it's in the best interests of the citizens of this state. It's supported by the overwhelming majority of the citizens of this state, and in the long run, it's in the best interest of our nation. Thank you.
Do one other thing to follow up with Dan, as he says, as to one of the things we heard today. I posed the question at the very beginning. As we know, the NRA has said, guns do not kill people, people kill people. I posed the question as to why wouldn't we take the reasonable step of having background checks to ensure that an individual is lawfully able to possess and purchase a firearm. You notice that the representative of the NRA, who has that as their motto, could not answer that question, and in fact said that they were against this bill. So you can't have it both ways. If you really truly believe that it's people that are killing people, then why wouldn't we have the common sense, reasonable approach of requiring those individuals to go through a background check to ensure that those individuals that we know have been prohibited by law from having easy access to firearms will not have that. Thank you.
Again, I'd like to thank you all for being here today. Thank all of our speakers, especially thank Senator Prozanski and Representative Williamson for your leadership on this issue. It's time to pass Senate Bill 941 and close the background check loophole in Oregon. All of us are available for questions. Thank you.